Sagali Swagwag, Yegun Sioni. So hello everyone. Today we are going to continue on with our language video lessons. We are on what we call Unit 5, and we break up Unit 5 into two parts. So today we're going to go over part 1, and that includes 3 topics. One is the A stem nouns, one is the C stem nouns, and the last one is colors. So those are the 3 topics that we're going to cover. So ungo anazesu ne tig, these are our new words. So let's get started. I will go over an overview, we'll get into the words, and then do some activities at the end. All right, so just a reminder, I always show this at the beginning of each language video lesson, just to kind of see where we're at in terms of learning all of the content in the first curriculum book that we have with the Oneida Language Department. And so we're near the end of that book. We have 5 different topics left to cover, and those make up the 2 sections in Unit 5. After that, there are more units. Those are in the second book. We also have a 3rd and a 4th curriculum book. So we kind of adhere that to 5 years of achieving language acquisition or fluency. I like to use the term proficiency. It is more of a spectrum-based approach in terms of language acquisition. So it's more realistic and more appropriate for learners, especially second language learners, specifically adults. Okay, so let's move on. Like I mentioned, Unit 5 is going to be broken up into 2 parts. This first part, we're going to cover A and C stem nouns. So this is what I want you to know from this section. I want you to learn the 14 A stem nouns we have, the 14 C stem nouns we have, and the 11 colors. I want you to be able to speak and pronounce each word correctly and know the definition of each or the English translation, or basically what they mean. Okay, so I want you to know the words of the A and C stem nouns and colors, and be aware of the whispered endings if they have a whispered ending, which is, remember, the underlined portion of the word. Okay, so I want you to be aware of the characteristics of A stem nouns. I want you to be aware of characteristics of C stem nouns, and I want you to be aware of colors and also the changes they make if they're used in a sentence. So some words have a whispered ending or an underlined portion. Some words have an ending that is sometimes found as EHL. When that's found in a word, it'll change a little bit when the word is used in a sentence. It's still the same word, it's just a small change. Okay, so I just want you to be aware of that in terms of the characteristics of each word. So the first part that we're going to learn about in this section is A and C stem nouns. So what about A and C stem nouns? Why do we call them A stem nouns? Why do we call them C stem nouns? Well, we learn the A and the C stem. Remember, there's pronouns that are associated with each of those stems. Those pronouns are used with verbs, and pronouns can be used with nouns. Okay, so although we're learning nouns by themselves, nouns actually can be incorporated into a verb. They can literally be added into a verb, and that makes the word much longer. It's what we call incorporation. And so you can change nouns too, depending on how you describe them. So although we're going to learn just the words in this unit, that's the base of how to learn more advanced changes of how those nouns exist, whether they exist in a verb through incorporation or whether they exist in some other type of description or change, like big, small, long, short. So that's why we learn nouns. Okay, so in this section, this is going to be a short introduction to nouns. There are 2 types of nouns that we're going to cover in this section. One is A stem nouns, one is C stem nouns. And we call them that because characteristics of those stem nouns, which come from the A stem and the C stem, pronouns that we learned about, those are important because when you change nouns later on, you got to know the stem. So right now, you're not really going to use too much of those characteristics when you're just talking about just the noun. But later on, when you change those nouns, you have to know the stem. Okay, so right now, we're just going to talk about characteristics. We're not really using them. I just want you to learn them. I just want you to be aware of them. So in the blue bullet, if nouns begin with the letter A, then it is an A stem noun. This can also sometimes later on, it can also begin with a wa, a W-A, okay? Oh, where did we see the wa? Well, we seen wa in the subjective A stem pronoun for it. Remember, gaza, la, you, wa. Okay, so wa is it. Nouns are not people. They're not subjects. They're just it. Okay, so sometimes you might see wa at the beginning of an A stem noun. Okay, that's why it's just it. So A stem nouns generally begin with A, but sometimes they can begin with a wa. Okay. In the red bullet, if a noun begins with an O or a ga, K-A, then it's a C stem. Okay. And remember, C stem roots are all indicated with a consonant. So they're indicated by H, K, L, N, S, T, W, and Y. Okay. So the O is basically like a filler, I guess you could say. I'm not entirely sure of the linguistic term, but in just layman's terms of when you're learning Oneida as like a regular person, not linguist background or anything, which is most of us learners, O is kind of a filler. It's kind of a joiner. So the root is actually the first letter of the consonant or the first consonant, whatever that letter is. That's your root. That's what starts your root. Okay. So anyway, the roots could start with any of those 8 consonants. That's how we know it's a C stem. Anyway, C stem nouns always will begin with an O or a ga. Where did we see ga? We seen ga in the C stem subjective pronoun for it. Remember? K, S, la, ye, ga. Ga is the last one in the first column, and that is the pronoun for it. Okay, because nouns are just a thing. They're just it. They're not any other subject. Okay, so by far the language is made up mostly of verbs and very few nouns. It is a language of action and movement. There are a few nouns. There's a few nouns that were chosen as an introduction into the kinds of nouns we have in our language. The learner is expected to know all of the nouns shown in this section, and they will be expanded on in the Oneida 2 curriculum book, okay? So there's lots more nouns. Generally, nouns are actually generally more found incorporation style. You will generally see them more in a verb, or you'll see them more in some other change, like in terms of counting or describing a noun, like big, small, long, short, something like that, heavy, hard, things like that, rather than by themselves. But we learn them by themselves to build, again, that proficiency. It's like we're building a foundation. Well, building a foundation to the house. We can't build a roof first. We have to build the foundation. This is the foundation. So I am incredibly strongly passionate about this because these are the fundamental aspects you need in developing language acquisition and developing speech. Okay, so I'm the teacher in this video. I present you with the tools to learn those things. It is up to you, the learner, the viewer, and the student to use that, to practice that, to speak that. You are responsible for your learning. You're responsible for how much speech or your success in language. Okay, so I'm here to help you. I'm here to guide you. And at the end of the day, you are the one to be responsible for yourself in developing that speech, developing these tools, using them within your mind, your heart, and your speech, and making all of that connect. Okay, so just a little inspirational TED Talk before we get started here, and the importance of A and C stem nouns. All right, so let's get started more into this, a little bit more about nouns. Most nouns in the language are either A or C stem, okay? If you're not sure, you don't have to really worry too much about identifying what type of stem a noun is. I will just tell you right now. Later on, though, those characteristics I just talked about, whether they start with an A or a wa or an O or a ga, keep that in mind. You don't need to know it right now, just keep it in mind. But most nouns in our language are A or C stem. Most verbs in our language are A or C stem. Number 1, C stem. Number 2, A stem. Why C stem? Because any root can start with any of those 8 consonants in our language. That's a lot of consonants. So any root that starts with any of those consonants is automatically C stem. You can see why the majority of our language is mostly C stem or A stem. But those other stems are just as important, and they are common. There's going to be common words you're going to know. They're not as frequent, but they're words you should know. So okay, so this is similar, like I said, to how most verbs are A or C stem, but there are a few nouns, not right now, that we're not going to talk about right now, but later on we will learn other nouns from other stems. So there are a few nouns that fall under other stems: the fakie, the caret, the I stem, and so on. So it is important to know the stem of the noun, A or C stem, because later on when we make changes or incorporate nouns, like I mentioned, you will need to know the stem of the noun, because certain pronouns of that stem will be associated in the change of that noun. That's why it's important. Every single thing is connected in our language. So at the end of the day, the STEM pronoun patterning system is by far the most important thing you need to know about this language, okay? Because it sets you up for success in developing proficiency and fluency in this language, okay? And every successful language program will tell you that. So you need to know the fundamentals of the language and how they work, how the language functions and is arranged, practice, speak, and the number of hours you practice and put into it is going to determine your success. Okay, so moving on. The majority of nouns are actually incorporated into other words in the language. They are rarely used alone in context of speaking and using the language, but we learn nouns alone for learning purposes. And so we will expand on this later on. Like I said, this is a foundation, this is a base for you. The purpose of this unit is to provide you with a solid foundation of nouns so that we can easily change them later on and revisit this later on the next year. So in the next book. So be aware that later on, some nouns that start with an O are not necessarily the C stem. So I'm telling you this right now, but later on, there's other stems that may be involved with a noun that starts with an O, okay? But generally, there's going to be another indicator, like a glottal after the O. It's going to tell you what stem that noun is. Just don't be fooled, okay? Just FYI, rule of thumb, okay? So they can also fall under other stems, but in this section, any noun that starts with an O is going to be a C stem noun as given, okay? So just for this unit right now, all right? So let's go over A stem nouns. Remember, A stem nouns will start with an A. For all of for the noun list in this section, they all start with an A. But again, like I mentioned, they can also start with a WA, a WA. So this should be around page 60 or 63 in your book. If you're following along the book, if not, you can just use this video. It's not a big deal. Some of you might be following along with the curriculum book. It might be around that page. We've done some reformatting and changes to those books, so the book pages may be a little different, but I believe that might have been the last page with the last update we did. So not too big of a deal if it's not that page. Just find the correct page. Be aware of whispered endings and the full word when spoken in a sentence. Take notes as needed. Take screenshots. Pause this if you need to digest some of the information. I just go through it because I'm kind of lecturing right now. But again, feel free to pause it. Feel free to follow along. Feel free to pause it and pronounce it if you're saying it back, whatever. All right, so let's move on. I'm going to say the full word, and then I'm going to say the word with the whispered ending. Okay, so full word is going to be what's used in a sentence. The whispered ending is just how it's going to be spoken when it's by itself. Okay, but for pronunciation, we practice both. So adequalaqua is a chair. The word by itself with the whispered ending, adequalaq. Okay, so I'm going to try to go through them in that same order. I'll say the full word, the whispered ending, and then the meaning. Okay, so I want you to try to pronounce them back to me when I say them. Okay, so adequalaqua, adequalaq, a chair. Oh, sorry, I actually just did adequalaq. So actually I just okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, I said adequalaq. So adequalaq is a table. These two, you can get them mixed up. You can just see I just mixed them up. So this is a neat my bad. Okay, so let's start over. Let's do this again. I'm just doing like a whole recording through just because I just don't want to edit this. So it takes a lot more time and I'm just kind of just doing a full run through of this. So this is actually a great example because these two can be easily confused because they are so similar. They sound very similar. They have one syllable that's different. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I was looking at this one and I was actually reading this one. So let's start over. So same thing. I'm going to pronounce the full word, the whispered ending, and then the meaning. So it's anitsqualak. Anitsqualakwa is a chair. So anitsqualakwa, anitsqualak, chair. Okay. Now a dequalak. So let's do this one. My apologies. I was getting ahead of myself and I'm trying to teach and speak at the same time. So, and then record. So it's kind of like a lot at once, but okay. So a dequalakwa, table, a diadwi, a shirt. And just a quick side note about this word, it can also mean a jacket or a dress. So this has more than one meaning. But right now you can just learn it as a shirt. Analole. Analo. A hat. Adungkwanha. Adungkwan. A belt. Anhusqualha. Anhusqual. Pants. Ahta. At. Shoe. Adlahti. Adlat. A sock. Nyanawa. Nyana. Glove or a mitten. Also, I have the picture of them on here so you can have like a visual reference. Every learner is different. Some of you might be learning it from my speech. Some of you might be visual learners and seeing the word and the meaning. And some of you might be more picture oriented in terms of that. You can also you might also be a kinesthetic learner. So it might help you to do like a motion to help you remember the words. So niana, like pretend you're putting on gloves or something that might help you remember. Okay, so I always try to make sure I am able to provide resources for any type of learner when I'm teaching. So the next one is asliye. Asli. So that's string or thread. Asale. Asa. That's a knife. A knife. So you can think of some type of motion if that's the type of learner you are to help you remember. Adogwat. Adogwat. It's a spoon. A spoon. Asekwe. Asek. So asegwe is the full word when you use it in a sentence. Asik is the word by itself. Fork. Aji. Aji. That is a plate. TSI in this word make a J sound, aji. So some words don't have that whispered ending, some do. Plate does not. So usually I just pronounce the word twice. So remember, like I had mentioned, whispered endings, they're underlined portions of words. They're either whispered or not spoken when the word is said by itself. But that underlined portion is spoken when it's used in a sentence. So just be mindful of that. It's not like a huge deal, but it's part of something that you're learning in terms of developing proficiency in the language. And that is a, I guess, rule of thumb, rule of the language. So you learn all those different aspects of the language. All right, so A-stem nouns in a simple sentence, because we were talking about whispered endings. So we talked about, well, we've kind of learned some of these already. Those are kind of helpful learner terms or words or classroom words you can use. So this word nate and natig, this first one right here, nate means what? Ne is kind of like an indicator. It doesn't really have a meaning. It just like specifies something, or it's kind of like, it's what we call a particle. It kind of joins other words together. And generally it's found in a phrase. And so that phrase will demonstrate whatever the meaning is. So it's by itself, it doesn't necessarily have like meaning, kind of has like a lot of meanings at the same time, if that makes sense. But together it means something that helps. So tig means that. Okay, so natine tig. What is that? That is a whole phrase. It's a question. What is that? Natine gaig. We already know nate is what. Ne is a part of this phrase. It's kind of a specifier, a joiner. Gaig, gaiga is the full word. Gaig means this. Natine gaig. What is this? That's what it means. So remember, tig or tiga is that, gaig or gaiga is this. Okay, so these are just small questions we can ask in a simple format. So a response, this is how you would format your response. So you would put your noun and then you would respond with ne tig. It means that is blank. So if I wanted to say, that is a shirt. Adiadwi ne tig. That is a shirt. That's the meaning. Or if I wanted to say this is a shirt, it would be adiadwi ne gaig. This is a shirt. Okay, so this is also a really good introductory lesson to sentence structure. Sentence structure is generally opposite to English. You can tell, because when you're saying in English, this is like the front of your sentence, but that's the end of your sentence in Oneida. So it's like flip-flop. Just that's a rule of thumb. It's generally the opposite. Oneida and English structure generally the opposite. So not all the time, but generally. Okay. So just keep that in your mind as a learner. Okay. So you can also shorten it. You do not have to have nay in there. So if I wanted to say something, you would have your noun and then tig. It still means that is blank. Or you could say your noun, gaig, this is blank. It means exactly the same thing. In Oneida, there's so many ways to say the exact same thing or to say something similar. It's the same thing in English, really. And I'm just showing you different versions of that. They're all correct. So the question, natine tig, what is that? Or natine gaig, what is this? Your response, or just a simple statement or a sentence to that question. You can say these without the prompt of a question also, but this is like the formal way, I guess you would say it, in a statement format. So either works. You could say the noun, ne, tig, that is whatever. Or you could say the noun, ne, gaig, this is whatever. Or you could say also the noun, tig, that is whatever. And the noun, gaig, that is whatever. Okay, so it's real simple, nothing too complicated. If you were asked a question, you could just respond with the noun too. You don't have to even say these like formal sentences. If they say not to tig, you could just say adiadawi. So you can say that too. So many options. Okay, so let's move on. Example 1, I already kind of said this, but just to show you if you're a visual learner, example 1, A-stem nouns with whispered endings or without a whispered ending. So the noun for shirt is adiadawit. In a simple sentence, you could say adiadawit ne tig, that is a shirt. Same way, but just saying it differently. Adiadawit tig, that's a shirt. So you can say it like that. You could also say adiadawit ne gaig, this is a shirt. Or adiadawi gaig, this is a shirt. Okay, so same thing, just different ways to say it. As a reference, literal translations of the Oneida language to English are often different, but we associate translations as to how we view this in English because we are second language learners. In the program, we teach through immersion. So their worldview in how they're structuring like thoughts and statements is a little different because they're first language learners. So that's more authentic to the structure of the language. We're second language learners. So we are familiar with the structure of English. And so our brain associates that in terms of translation. It's not that we can't achieve that. It's just that we're already kind of pre-programmed and preconditioned to that. And so it takes some work on our end to deprogram that or, uncondition ourselves to more of an Oneida format of things. And so through immersion, it can create first language speakers, but it can push second language speakers to have more of that worldview because of the mechanism or method of immersion education. So it's just a side note here. Many of you are parents in the program, so it's just helpful. This is a great example in understanding how language is incredibly impactful in the mind. And that is what we're really preserving is the worldview. So speech is one thing and the language is one thing, but really what's underneath and what's going on in that perception of the world through our worldview, through our Indigenous lens is really what we're trying to capture. So again, my little TED Talk, we'll move on. So let's see. We associate translations as to how we view this in English. Like I mentioned, in Oneida, sentences are often structured differently, usually opposite, like I mentioned, as to how you would say them in English. Okay, so just FYI, adiadawit ne tig is the literal translation. The literal translation is like shirt is that. Okay, that sounds weird in English, right? But we know that to be right here, we know this to be that is a shirt. So that's just your kind of assumed translation in English. Adiadawit tig, shirt is that. That sounds weird when you say that in English. So when we say adiadawit tig, we just translate that as that is a shirt because it does mean that. It does. It just the literal translation sometimes does help though later on when you're translating and you're working on Oneida sentence structure because you're going to see, oh, okay, it really is very different than English, the formatting. So when I'm trying to speak Oneida, basically how I would say it in English will probably be opposite of how I would want to say that in Oneida. So it's kind of a skill that you might use later on. The literal translation is shirt is this. Sounds weird, right? Because we just know that to be this is a shirt. Okay. So this is just FYI. I don't want you to really translate them like this right now. I just want you to be aware of this. Okay. So shirt is this. It's just another example. It just means more so that this is a shirt. Okay. So I wanted to use another example. My great example that I was saying was a dekolak. Just kidding. It's a nitskolak. They sound so similar. I'll go through the whole list again at the end. But example 2, a nitskolak is a chair. The full word is a nitskolakwa. Okay, so by itself, I just say a nitskolak. But if I'm using it in a sentence right here, we're going to say the whole word. I just want to really reinforce whispered endings. Okay, so like generally when we're telling a story, the whispered ending is going to indicate the end of a statement or a sentence that's being said. In a written story, same thing. We don't really use a period to end the sentence. It's the whispered ending that indicates the end of the thought. It's more authentic to the functionality and the arrangement of the language. So the word for chair, anitskolak, the underlined portion is whispered or not spoken when it's said alone. In a simple sentence, you would pronounce it as anitskolakwa, ne, tig, that is a chair. Anitskolakwa, tig, same thing, just a different version of how to say it without the ne, that is a chair. Anitskolakwa ne gaig, this is a chair, okay? Or anitskolakwa gaig, this is a chair, same thing. Okay, so this is our A stem noun list. I have the word and then the meaning. I'm going to say it and then I want you to repeat it. I'll say the full word, whispered ending, or I'll just say it twice if there is no whispered ending, and the meaning. Okay, so I want you to repronounce this back to me just to help you learn these words. So, anitskolakwa, chair. Adekwalakwa, table. Adiadawi, shirt. Analole, analo, hat. Adunkwanha, belt. Sorry, I just flip-flop in there. Anhusqualha, full word. Anhusqual, whispered ending. Pants. Ata, shoe. Adlati, sock. Nianawa, niano, glove or a mitten. Aslie, string or thread. Asale, asa, that's a knife. Adogwat, spoon. Aji, plates. Asegwe, fork. So those are A stem nouns. There's 14 of them. So what I would really recommend if you're learning these, make flashcards. Word in Oneida on one side, English on the other. Picture on one side, Oneida word on the other, or whatever with the English meaning, whatever you want to do. Those will really help you. Just keep flashing through them, okay? I'll do a couple activities on here, but on your own time, that's one way I would recommend to study, to learn these words, or however else you want to do them. There's other ways you could do this as well. So let's talk about C stem nouns. We also have 14 C stem nouns, and I'm going to show you the picture, show you the word, tell you the meaning, and we'll practice the pronunciation. And we'll use them briefly in a sentence. Okay, so C stem nouns. Let's talk about those. C stem stands for consonant stem. Almost all C stem nouns start with a ga or an o. Okay, be aware of whispered endings and the full word when spoken in a sentence. Take notes as needed. All right, so the first one, I'm going to say the full word all the way through, the word with a whispered ending, and then the meaning. And I want you to pronounce both of those after I say them. Okay, so gahule, gahul. Gun. Galista quatslode. Galista quatslo. Stairs or staircase. Osungale. Osungal. A board or floor. So you can see board on the one picture or floor. We use osungale or osunga a lot for floor, especially in the classroom. Ganusode. Ganusot. That's a house. There's another word for house. You can also say ganus or ganusa as well. So this one is kind of the one we've used in here. But actually, this is a noun incorporation noun. The ode means a standing. So it means like a standing upright house. They're both correct. So just FYI, if you hear another word, there's other words for house. Okay. Ganakte or ganakt. That's bed. It also means space or geez, what the heck else is it? Like your spot, like we use it a lot for like our spot or our space, like when we're talking about it or using it in class, like where's your spot? Where's your space? That's Indonesia anak, like where's your spot? We use it like that. But bed, it can mean bed too. So just FYI, right now we use it as bed, but it means like space as well. Or room, it can mean room too. So FYI, that's it. Gayungwali. Or gayungwil. Sorry, what am I saying? This is a long lesson, so I'm starting to zone out for a second. Gayungwile. So let's start from the beginning, saying the full word, whispered ending, and then the meaning. Okay, so gayungwile. I think my pronunciation was off on that first one. Sometimes that's actually really good to be a critical learner of yourself. If you make mistakes, correct yourself. It's actually a really good aspect of learning. You always learn from those mistakes. Okay, so gayungwile is an arrow. Gayungwil, an arrow. Okay. There's one other thing I was gonna say. I'll wait till the end. Gahuwe is a boat or a canoe. It has been some time since I talked about these nouns, like years actually. We use them all the time, but I don't always formally like teach them like this, but it's kind of nice. It's a good refresher for me actually. So gayale is a bag or a purse. Ganunao is a pipe. Ganaji, that's a pot. Ganagale, ganagal, a stick. All right, so here's one of those words. There's two versions of the word. When you say it by itself, it is ganundotsel. When you say it in a sentence, it is ganundotsli. Okay, it's the exact same word. This EHL will change to an LI. It's just how the language, when they have endings like this, they just change a little bit when you use them in a sentence, okay? It's just a characteristic of the language. So ganundotsel, ganundotsli, box. Okay, kind of like wadel and wadlu. Remember the word for number 9? Or degel, deglu. Okay, so yes, they're both the same word for 9, but one is used one way and one is used in a sentence. So that is really demonstrates your knowledge and depth of and familiarization of the language. Okay, gahyadusel. I actually don't have the alternate version on here, but when you say it in a sentence, it's gahyadusli. Same thing. We see the EHL changes the same way. I don't know if it's in the book. That might be a change we have to make or an update in the book if you're following along. So just FYI, as a program, we always try to fix our formatting issues or any changes we need to make. So just be patient, I guess, as we are all learning. So gahyadusel or gahyadusli is the full word. Galundode or galundot is a tree. So there's some other words for tree. Galunt, you can also say galunt. That's the word for tree, but this is the one we're using for the book. Okay, so remember, whispered endings are underlined portions. They're whispered or not spoken when the word is said alone. However, the underlined portion is spoken when it's used in a sentence. So let's talk about that. So we talked about our classroom terms. Natinetig, what is that? Natinegaiig, what is this? We can use that into learning about how to respond in a simple sentence. So If I asked you not ne tig, you could respond saying the noun ne tig or the noun ne gaig to say this is or that is, whatever. All right. I just want you to be familiar with how we're using nouns in a sentence or with the whispered endings. So sentence format, they can be shortened and said as just tig or gaig. So the noun tig, that is whatever. The noun gaig, this is whatever. So let's use that as an example in using natine tig or natine gaig. Okay, so this is a review. I'm not going to go through this. You can screenshot it or pause it if you would like to read it again. But let's use a C-stem noun without a whispered ending. So a good example of that is ganaji, the word for a pot. Okay, so ganaji ne tig, that is a pot. Or you could also say ganaji tig, that is a pot. This means the same thing. It's just another way to say it. You can also say this is a pot. You would say either ganaji ne gaig, or you could say ganaji gaig. This is a pot. Okay. So again, we talked about literal translation. So if I said ganaji natig, it might mean something more literally like pot is that, or ganaji tig, pot is that. But when you translate it to English, you would just say that is a pot. So it is mean that. I just want you to have an understanding about how translations work in terms of our language to English, okay, and the structure of our sentences. So ganaji ne gaig, again, pot is this, or ganaji gaig, pot is this, but like again, we would just translate that to this is a pot, okay. This is a good refresher for me. I haven't taught like this specific content in a while in terms of nouns, so this is like a good refresher for me too, I guess, as you can tell. So there's a lot more nouns than this, and like in class and immersion, we just say them, we use them like in real time, and so to teach them more formally is kind of like just different, I guess. I've been doing this immersion for a while now, so it's like a good it's a good little practice for me and the learner. So let's talk about using a noun, a C-stem noun with a whispered ending. So let's use gahuwe or gahuwe ya. That's the full word. So that's the word for boat or canoe. We could use it in our simple sentence format saying gahuwe ya ne tig or gahuwe ya tig. They both mean that is a boat or that is a canoe. Gahuwe ya ne gaig, this is a boat or a canoe, or you could say gahuwe ya gaig, this is a boat or a canoe. All right, so we learned a little bit about that. I'm going to go through the entire list, full word, whispered ending, meaning. I want you to pronounce them after I say the full word and the word with the whispered ending. So gahule, gahu, gun, galista quatslode, galista quatslo, stairs or staircase. Osungale, osunga. Ganusode, ganusot is a house. And sorry, osunga was a border floor. Ganakte, ganakt is a bed or space or room, just FYI. Gayunguile, gayunguil, arrow. Gahueya, gahuwe, a boat or a canoe. Gayale, gaya, a bag or purse. Ganunawa, ganunao, pipe. Ganaji, ganaji is a pot. Ganagale, ganaga, stick. Ganundotsea, or ganundotsli if it's used in a sentence. That's the word for box. Gahyadonsea, or if it's used in a sentence, it's gahyadonsli. That's the word for a book or a page or a letter also. So I don't want to overwhelm you with all those meanings, but later on, when you start to work with nouns more, you'll understand like the additional meanings that they have, I guess you could say. Galundode. Galundot is a tree. A standing upright tree or log is even more of a detailed definition of that. Right now, just learn it as tree. This is just an introduction. So that's what I want you to learn right now. Okay, so those are our 2 sets of nouns. So I think I'm going to just do like a quick review of all of them. I'm not, maybe I will say the meaning just so you know where I'm at. So I'm going to go through all of them again, and I want you to practice the pronunciation. Anit squalakwa. Anit squalak. Chair. Adequalakwa. Adequalak. Table. Adiadawi. Shirt. Analole. Analo. Hat. Adunkwanha. Adunkwan. Belt. Anhu squalha. Anhu squal. Pants. Ata. At. Shoe. Adlati. Adlat. Sack. Atnianawa. Atniana. A glove or a mitten. Asliye. Asli. String or thread. Asale. Asa. That's a knife. Adogwat. Adogwat. Spoon. Aji. Aji. Plate. Asegwe. Aseg. Fork. Okay, see some nouns. I'll do the same thing. Say the full word, whispered ending, meaning, and pronounce them after I do both of those. So, gahule. Gahul. Galista quatslode. Galista quatslo. Stairs or staircase. Sorry, gahule was gun. I forgot to say the meaning. Osungale. Osungal. Board or floor. Ganusode. Ganusot. House. Ganakte. Ganakt. Bed. Gayungwile. Gayungwil. An arrow. Gahuea. Gahue. A boat or a canoe. Gayale. Gaya. Bag or purse. Ganunao. Ganunawa is the full word. Pipe. Ganaji. Pot. Ganagale. Ganagal. Stick. Ganudotsel. Ganudotsli. Box. Box. Gahyadusel. Or gahyadusli if it's used in a sentence, is a book or a page. Galundote. Galundot. It is a tree. Okay. So those are A and C some nouns. We have one more topic to cover in this video, and that is colors. Woohoo. So Nyadewa Sokwak is the title of this section. You might see that in the book. It means all different kinds of colors. Nyadewa Sokwak means all the colors, all the different kinds of colors. That's the word. So the color section begins with a question. That question is Otniwa Sokoda ne gaig. You might hear that phrase and you might think, oh, I know a few words in there. Gaig, remember we just talked about is this. The whole phrase means what kind of color is this? So again, when you see a phrase like that, there's other ways to say it. You could say, Otniwa Sokoda gaig. You do not have to use the ne, means exactly the same thing. What kind of color is this? You can also just say Oniwa Sogod. Or Oniwa Sogoda is the full phrase, but if you say it by itself, you just say that. It means what kind of color? There's another version of how to say it. So ot means kind of like when it's used in terms of a noun and describing the kind of something, it means what. Same thing with the next two particle phrases. So ot kind of means what when it's used like this, when it's used with this. Ot nate and nate both also mean what. They're particle question phrases. They mean what. Okay, so it's another way how to say this same exact thing. Ot nate niwa sokoda negaig. What kind of color is this? Ot nate ni wa soko de gaig. I'm not using the ne. Same thing. It means what kind of color is this? You can also say nate ni wa soko de ne gaig. What kind of color is this? Or you could say nate ni wa soko de gaig. You don't use the ne. It still means the same thing. What kind of color is this? You can also swap out gaig, which means this, to be interchanged with tig, which means that. So you could say ot ni wa soko de ne tig, like if you were pointing to something. It means what kind of color is that? You could say ot ni wa soko de tigan ni tkolak. What kind of color is that chair? It's another way of saying something different, but using either gaig or tig correctly, depending on what you're trying to say. Appropriately, I guess you could say. Okay, so you learned a few different ways of how to ask questions with the meanings. So if we're asking questions, how are we going to respond? Here is options and examples of responses. So the responses for the color section follow this format. Again, the question was, Ot ni wa soko de ne gaig, what kind of color is this? The answers or ways you can structure your responses are you can use many different options, and these are the options. Some of the options. So you could say your color, then you add ni wa soko de ne gaig. Your color, it's this kind of color this is. Or it also means the color is this kind of color. It means that as well. Or it just means is this color. Okay, so again, obviously that sounds funny. In English, you would say this is the kind of color, or this is the color, like that you're talking about. Okay, well, what does this other part of these words mean? Right now, just know that they mean the kind of color. You don't have to understand too much of that structure right now. You will learn that later on in follow-up curriculums when you learn how to put together a description or a change talking about the kind of something. When you talk about the kind of something, generally you're going to have an ni, ni, your pronoun, wa, your root of your noun, which is incorporated, and then your ending, oda. Okay, so that's how this entire word comes together to mean the kind of color. And that is why nouns are important, because osokwa is an irregular astem noun. Don't worry about that, but you have to know that because you have to use the appropriate pronoun and then understand how the structure or pattern of how to say the kind of something is put together. Okay, so that's what this whole thing means. That's what they all come together to do. Right now, I just want you to be familiar of the sentence structure, and later on, you'll understand what those words mean and then how to put all those pieces together. Saying that same phrase in a different way, you can say the color, ni wa soko de gaig. Same thing. These are the meanings. Is this kind of color this is, or is this kind of color, or is this color? Or you can simply just say your color, ni wa soko or ni wa soko de. Blank is this kind of color. That's all you're saying. Okay. You can also structure it, and you don't even have to say ni wa soko. You can just say the color, ne gaig, or you can say the color, gaig. This is the color, or this is the other color. Okay, the literal translation is the color is this, but again, that sounds funny, so just be aware of your literal translations. Hopefully you can see my little arrow here. Gaig, it means this, can also be interchanged with tig, which means that. You can say color, ne tig, that is blank color, whatever. Okay, so these are just options. I'm going to show you like examples and kind of streamline what an easy way to respond to this question is, but just be mindful that these are other ways you can say this. Okay. I just don't want you to be like stagnant in your learning and be like, I can only say ni wa soko. Like, no, you cannot say this many other ways. Other people will say it other ways. That's the beauty of language. There's so many ways to say different things. And it's the same thing in English. I'm not the same. I don't speak the same way that my friend does. You know, we all speak, like we have our own personalities and identity, and that influences how we talk. And so that's the same thing with Oneida. It influences how you talk, your preferences. And so some of you might have a certain type of preference, or you might have another preference on how to say something a different way. And all of that is the beauty of language. You need to know all of it. Okay. So let's move on. Nyare wa sokwa means all the colors, or all different kinds of colors. All kinds of colors can mean that too. So what I want you to know is you should know the colors, be aware of the whispered endings and how the words are said, or how they change if they're used in a sentence. So it looks like we have a couple of those funny endings, the EHL, that will change a little bit when you use them in a sentence. So be mindful of that. And you should know the question and the response that is associated with our color section of the unit. Okay, so I will say the word swanda. Swant is black. Swanda ni wa sokod. Okay, so black is this kind of color. You could also say swanda ne gaig. This is black. Or you could say swanda gaig. This is black. Or you could say swanda tig. That is black. Or swanda ne tig. That is black. Just many other ways using those examples to say this. So swant by itself is the word. When it's used in a sentence, you say swanda. So the underlined portion is spoken. Okay, that's the main thing I want you to learn from this. Okay, so swanda niwa sokod. It's more of a formal way to say it, but I just want you to learn that. Black is the kind of color. Swanda niwa sokod ne gaig. Or you could even like more so because you're learning like sentence structure. Swanda niwa sokoda ne gaiga adiaduit. This kind of the color of this shirt is black, or the black is the kind of color of this shirt. It's like saying the same thing in two different ways in English. But that's what that means. That statement means in Oneida. Okay, so just an example. Swant, swanda. That's the pronunciation of black. Swanda niwa sokod. Black is the kind of color. Let's move on. Olu. Oluya is the full word. Oluya niwa sokod. Blue. Adagal, whispered ending. Adagala, full word, gray. Adagala niwa sokod. Awal. Awala, green. Awala niwa sokod. Green is the kind of color. Ojinkwal, no whispered ending here, it's just ojinkwal. TSI in this word, make a J sound. Ojinkwal. Okay, ojinkwal niwa sokod. Oniguanta, full word. Oniguantala, red. Oniguantala niwa sokod. Red is the kind of color. Ohalana, ohalananda, purple. Ohalananda niwa sokod. Owiskal. In a sentence, you see it in this example, it changes to owiskla, white. Okay, by itself, it's owiskal. In a sentence, owiskla. Okay, same thing. Always remember that 8 and 9 number thing I taught you about. Degal wadal changes to deglu wadlu if something follows it or it's in a sentence. Okay, same thing. That EHL, if you see that on the end of a noun, it's going to change when it's used in a sentence. That is the appropriate way of how the nouns function and how they change. Okay, if slightly, if they're used in a sentence. Owiskal. Owiskla niwa sokod. Oniguantala owiskal. Same thing we see in the EHL ending. So it is a long word. So I'll say it piece by piece if you're a new learner and you want to work more so on that slow pronunciation. Oni guanta la wiskal. A little bit more. Oni guanta la wiskal. Let's put it together. Oniguantala wiskal. Again. Oniguantala wiskal. One more time. Oniguantala wiskal. A little bit faster. Oniguantala wiskal. Oniguantala wiskal. Pink. EHL on the end of that word, it's used by itself. Oniguantala wiskal. But if it's used in a sentence, it's going to sound like Oniguantala wiskla. Oniguantala wiskla. Oniguantala wiskla niwa sokod. Pink is the kind of color. Okay, another thing I just wanted to mention about this word. Oniguantal was red, right? Owiskal was white. You're basically putting those two nouns together. And if you actually mix red and white, it makes pink. So same thing with our language. Makes pink. So oniguantala wiskal, pink. So just a little side note. There are more meanings to these words, okay? That's a great like segue into that. Ojinkwalagalas means orange, but there's actually like more of a deeper root to this word that has more of a meaning. Like the word for blue, olu, actually means sky. But because the sky is blue, that's also our color that we use. So just like FYI, these are like now like well-known translations or English translations of these colors, but there are older, deeper meanings of many, many words, almost every word in our language that have more of a deeper meaning in our language rather than an English associated meaning. And a lot of those meanings are reflective of our environment, reflective of our connections and relationships to one another, and our cultural values and cultural practices. So just like cool little factoid for you. Okay, so I'm like literally recording this video by myself. So this is like how I talk. I just crack myself up. So Ojinkulagalas is orange. Ojinkulagalas niwasokod. Orange is the kind of color. Wadasogwas is brown. Wadasogwas, brown. All right. Those are all of our colors. I'm going to say them again. I'm going to say the full word, whispered ending, meaning. I'm going to say the word when it's used by itself or how it's used in a sentence, if that is applicable per word. Okay. So, swanda. Swant. Black. Oluya. Olu. Blue. So feel free to pronounce it after me if you're watching. Adagala. Adagal. Gray. Awal. Awala. Green. Sorry, flip-flopping there. Ojinkwal. Ojinkwal. Yellow. Oniguantala. Full word. Whispered ending. Oniguantal. Red. Ohalananda. Full word. Whispered ending. Ohalana. Purple. Owiskal. That is how we use it by itself. In a sentence, we say owiskla. Let's see. Oniguantalawiskal. That's the word by itself. Now, if we use it in a sentence, it's oniguantalawiskla. So we have oniguantalawiskal, oniguantalawiskla. I might have said oniguantalawiskla for both of them, but sorry. Oniguantalawiskal, oniguantalawiskla. Ojinkolaglas, orange. Wadasogwas, brown. So those are our words. We learned a lot of words today. We learned 39 total nouns. Okay, so also a good review for me because I haven't done this in a while. As you can tell. So, this is the PowerPoint that I use for like parent and community language video lessons. I used to use these when I taught high school like over 5 years ago. So I actually haven't revisited these PowerPoints in a while, but they're very useful when we're talking about this type of lesson. So hopefully that helped you visually as well. So again, we talked about our colors. Swanda, swant, oluya, olu, adagala, adagal, awala, awal, ojinkwal, oniguantala, oniguantal, ohalananda, ohalanat, owiskal, owiskla, oniguantalawiskal, oniguantalawiskla, jinkulagalas, wadasogwas. Those were our colors. So, let's see, we're not going to do that, but we talked about all of these nouns. So a few little, let me see if I can move my little video here so you can see the screen better. So natinega-ig, this is a little video. I have the picture and the English meaning. I want you to tell me what they mean. Natinega-ig. So I'm pointing at number 1. Good practice. Adekolak. Natinega-ig. Number 2. Chair. Anitskwalak. Natinega-ig. Number 3. Adiadui. Okay, so that's kind of like if you were to do this, you could screenshot this activity and you could print this. You can review it right on your phone. And just look at the picture, the meaning. Oh, okay. Number 5, belt. That is adunkwan. Shoe, at, plate, aji, knife, asa, glove or mitten, atniana. Okay, so you just know them. So that's kind of an example of an activity you can do. You can take away the words, just use the pictures. These are just different activities I want to show you of how you can use them to study. Okay, because the video is one thing, watching the video is just the lecture. That's just introducing the information to you. Now you have the information, what are you going to do with it? To develop proficiency in speech in the language, you got to use it, you got to practice it, you got to study it. Okay, so same thing. You could screenshot this, you could print this, you could cut up these pictures in this table and just flip them over. And okay, the first one you flip over, a picture of a table. Oh, a decolak. Second one you flip over, maybe it's pants. Oh, anhu squall. Okay, so another activity you can do, you can name them. A decolak, a need squalak, a diadawi, analo, a dunkwan, anhu squall, at, adlat, atnyano, asli, asal, adogwat, asik, and aji. Okay, so that is our A-stem nouns, just a few examples of how we can you can study, use these to study. So same thing with C-stem nouns. You can do the same exact activities. Picture, word, or meaning, and you could screenshot this, you could review this on your own, print it, you can cut out whatever you print into you can print this chart, cut it out, do some matching, make a flashcard, glue them to index cards. There's so many ideas, there's so many possibilities. And as a learner, successful language acquisition is truly dependent on self-initiative and self-sufficiency. Okay, so as the teacher, I present you with the tools and the information, and what are you going to do with those tools and information? You're going to put them in your toolbox, you're going to use them, you're going to get to work. Practice, speak, study, do it by yourself, find someone else to do it with your kids, whatever. Make labels, put them in your house, put them on a post-it, whatever you have to do to study. Everyone is a different type of learner. Only you know how you learn best. And taking self-initiative to implementing this language into your daily life is going to contribute to your success majorly. So, it's just one misconception, I guess, that I kind of want to address in terms of language learning, because sometimes people think, okay, like, well, teach me language, and it's as if the responsibility falls on the teacher for making you speak the language. Like, only you are responsible for yourself. We are all individuals. We are accountable and responsible to ourselves, and our behaviors, especially our behaviors in our outlook on learning language and speaking our language and being responsible for our language, it falls on us. It falls on our individual abilities and behaviors. And so if it's part of our behaviors to study 10 minutes a day, you're going to get that type of outcome. If you study for an hour a day, you're going to get more of an outcome. If you study for 8 hours a day, you're going to get way more of an outcome. So just keep in mind that, okay? Just keep in mind, you are responsible for your learning in anything, especially in language, okay? And we are all responsible for this language. So my little TED Talk for the nouns today. So same thing, you can do the same thing here. I want to vary activities slightly. Sometimes what I do is you make flashcards. You can make flashcards with a picture and then the word, or you can make it a little bit more challenging. Just use the picture, or just use the English word. You can go through all of these. If you were reading this, you could say, oh, gaho, that's the first picture. Second picture, galista quatzlo. Third picture, osunga. Fourth picture, ganusot. Ganakt. Ganu now. Ganaji, that would be the next picture. First one in the second row. Gayungwil, Gaya, Gahue, Gahyadusel, Galundot, Ganagal, Ganudotsel. So those are our words here. So that is just another idea of how you can study these nouns. Same thing with the colors. You can do some type of activity with this. Use the colors, use the word in English. Oniwa sokoda gaig. You can just go through them. Okay, well, that's obviously blue. Olu, Ojinkwa, a wall, that's number 3. Ojinkwalaglas is orange. 5 is black, that's Otswant. Oniguantal, Oniguantalawiskel, Adagon, Ohalanat, Wadasogwas, Owiskel. Okay, so that is our colors. It's just another activity, same thing. It's the exact same chart. Just want to give you ideas of how to study. Okay. Another way of how to learn. You can screenshot this if you would like it. Same thing. Okay. Obviously, this is swant, olu, adagal. I want you to be able to just identify them when you just see them. Okay. That is the goal of your speech. Let's see. Also, I just have another little activity here. If I put a word on here, ojinqua, that is yellow. Jinquilaglas, pause it if you need more time. Orange. Adagal, adagala niwasokod, gray. Ohalanad, what color is that? Purple. Wadasogwas, brown. Same thing, what color is this? Soniguantalawiskel, pink. So if you read it, if you hear it, you should be able to identify it in every way. Translation, every single way. That is going to demonstrate how much you know about said content or topic. Owiskel, white. Oniguanta, what color is that? Red. A wall, green. Olu, color, blue. Swant, what color is this? Black. Okay, and I think that's it. So those are some activities you can use to study A and C STEM nouns. I think that's it for today's video lesson. And then there's just one more video lesson, and that completes the first book of the Oneida 1 curriculum set. So, Toganik, that's it. Yawanko. So thank you, and Nukiwa.